Well, again, thank you, Ananda Pune, everyone there. This satsang this evening begins with a passage from the Gita, and it's a very notable one as yogis. And it's chapter 2, stanza 40, where Krishna says, "In this path of yoga action, there is no danger of unfinished business, nor are there latent within it the opposite, canceling effects of duality. Even a little practice of this religion will free one from dire fears and colossal sufferings, which are inherent in the unceasing cycles of death and rebirth." And we usually talk about the dire fears and colossal sufferings part, which I'm not going to talk about that, so don't worry. We're not going to be talking about fears and sufferings and colossal sufferings. It's more about the danger of unfinished business, which in the practice of yoga, it is not there. And Swamiji, in his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, he points out that yoga, as he puts it, is inseparable from action, or it provides the how-to of the spiritual path. That's such an interesting statement. I've never heard anyone say anything like that, but it's so true. Yoga is inseparable from action. It is. It's the action of how we get out of delusion. Kriya Yoga. Kriya means action, and it's working with the energy in the astral spine, moving it up and down in an act. And it is the way that we get out, but he says that unlike other actions and worldly deeds, it is liberating because there are no thwarting cross currents of ego involved with it. And every ego-inspired act has a reaction, has a karmic rebound to it. But in selfless meditation, service, guru devotion, Kriya Yoga, done rightly, and that's the qualification, that's the fine print in all this, is that it doesn't bind us. It frees us from action, and it frees us from all karma. Now, the caveat is that it needs to be done in a selfless way. One time, Nayaswami Devarsiji, she quoted Swamiji as saying that all yoga practice, whether yoga postures, meditation, Kriya Yoga, the reason it all works is that it cooperates with divine grace. It's cooperating with grace. And so it's not something that we introduce or bring into ourselves that's outside of ourselves. It's cooperating with the natural flow of grace. And even the techniques of yoga, he said, the reason that they work is that they cooperate with the flow of grace. Now, the catch is that we have to practice these things with the right attitude of complete selfless giving to God. Any selfless act is liberating. Any self-involved act of thinking what's in it for me is binding. Even yoga, in a way, not in a way, it just is, period. And Swamiji tells the story that I think that we all are familiar with, of that brother disciple of his who practiced Kriya Yoga hours and hours a day. One time he meditated for 40 hours straight. But he was doing it with the thought of, if I do this, then I'll get so much of that, and that being liberation or freedom. But it was done in a self-involved way. And he did thousands and hundreds of thousands of kriyas even. And yet he stormed out of the Guru's ashram and complained. So I didn't come here to rake leaves, is what he said. I think he was assigned just to rake leaves, which I've done that many times in my life. It's one of the most enjoyable things to do in the forest under the trees. I've done it at Ananda Village. And Swamiji says that in his case, practicing Kriya actually reinforced and strengthened the ego. And because he was doing it with this attitude of what's in it for me, rather than just pure, complete devotional self-offering. And so we have to be aware that how we do these things is really where the results come from. And in a way, we hear that Kriya hastens our spiritual progress. In a way, it hastened his spiritual progress, because in some way, he had to get through that experience of learning that you don't practice Kriya Yoga or meditation thinking of yourself and what you're going to get out of it. He had to learn that. So Kriya hastened that process in a way. by strengthening the ego, strange as it may sound. And so the whole goal of it all is selflessness. That's the whole idea. And the more that we can act in that way in whatever we do, whether it's service, meditation, chanting, kindness to our family members, if we can learn that complete selfless offering to God through others in service, and especially during meditation and Kriya Yoga, that in itself is liberating. And selflessness, I'm seeing more and more over the years, selflessness is saintliness. When we can be selfless, we become free inside, we become saintly inside, because then there's no ego blocking the flow of divine grace, of God's power flowing through us. And so think always in terms of that, not in terms of what karma we have to work out. There's one of my favorite all-time passages from Master's teachings is when he was telling a struggling disciple, and I'll read it, I think it's from Conversations with Yogananda. He told, or maybe it's Essence of Self-Realization, I'm not sure which, but Master said to a struggling disciple, your job for now is to get to God. Don't worry about all the karma you will still have to complete. Let God worry about that. First, destroy in yourself the source of karmic involvement. That source is your attachment to the ego. Once the ego is emerged in him, then any actions you perform will no longer revert to yourself. Your actions will be like writing on water. They will leave no trace in the mind. In severing yourself from egoic involvement in any action that you perform, you will have cut the Gordian knot of delusion. This is the state of the Jivan Mukta, one who is free inside, even while living in this world. Being inwardly free, nothing he does can ever affect him again. And this is the state that we're trying to achieve. And we think Jivan Mukta, oh God, that's way too hard. You know, you read about it in the great Who Was a Jivan Mukta, an autobiography of Yogi, and you look at the list of Jivan Muktas and you think, oh God, I'm definitely not going to qualify for that in this lifetime. But what Master is saying is that yes, what we can do is to act in freedom, which is in selflessness. And when we can act in that way, in a way we become Jivan Mukta-like in that moment. And so that's really the essence of becoming a Jivan Mukta. It's not meditating for so many hours, doing so many kriyas. It's becoming free inside of that egoic involvement. And we can do that in every moment, and we can work at it in every moment. And it may be the most important thing that we have to work on. And applying that in meditation, in kriya, and service. I have a friend who's a Sanskrit scholar, and Master says that the word kriya and the word karma, they both have the root of the word action and to act. And I asked this man, so what's the difference between kriya and karma then? They're both to act. What is especially in Sanskrit, what's the interpretation of how kriya is different from karma? And this man said that kriya, even the word itself as a verb, I think it is, to act, it has the connotation of a right or a selfless offering kind of an act, a pure act. And so even in Sanskrit, he told me the verb, it implies pure act. And this is what Master was saying, is that kriya versus karma, they're both actions, but one is binding because there's ego involved and it's what's in it for me, likes and dislikes, the reactive process. And so there's a karmic rebound. But kriya is a pure act of giving to God. And I think in Autobiography of a Yogi, Master talks about kriya as a right, given to God, not as something that I'm going to get something out of it, but giving ourselves in complete devotional self-offering. And this is why Swamiji said every kriya should be an act of devotional self-offering. And I think you could say that if it's not an act of devotional self-offering, then it's not kriya, because kriya implies that purity of heart, of giving, with no thought of what's in it for me. One of the joys I shared that earlier, that the monastery, we got this change of land use to become institutional land that now we can legally build a whole monastery and more buildings than we even need to because of this change. And it was forest land before. So this was a really big step. And the person who really made it happen was Brahmachari Premdas. And he, over the course of almost 2 years, went to these government offices. I bet 40 times he went to those government offices. And they were putting one hurdle after another, one roadblock after another. And he never complained. He never asked, well, gosh, I wish I could be doing something else. He never lost faith or doubted. There was just this pure selfless giving, even without thought of whether it was going to work or not. It just was purely giving. And the people in the offices, the secretaries and everybody, they just loved him every time he came in. They would start chanting Radhe, Radhe to him. And it was a very sweet energy because he brought that complete giving of himself to everybody there. And I asked him one time, about halfway through it, when just one more hurdle, and it almost seemed like they were intentionally trying to stop us from doing it. And I asked him, well, have you ever doubted that this would work, that it would succeed? And he looked at me puzzled, like he didn't look at me like I was crazy, but he looked at me like I was confused. And he just said, no, doubt, that was never even an option. And I was just, in the way he said it, there was such a deep truth to it. Doubt, he was saying, is a choice. It's an option. Isn't that so interesting? We think of doubt as these things that sneak in and cause us to doubt ourselves and to doubt what we're doing. And he was saying that was never a choice that he could make. That part was fascinating. But more so it was that selfless giving that resulted in not a karmic rebound, but just the offering of a monastery and the ability to build a monastery that wasn't even his own thing. It wasn't like he succeeded and was able to proclaim a success. It was something for others, to give to others. And in that selflessness, there is freedom. There is divine freedom. It was very sweet, he said, today when he got, because he would be going week after week, and even a year ago, people working in the office say, you haven't gotten that yet? They haven't given it to you yet? And he would just continue to go with this just pure-hearted attitude for those of you who know him. But finally today, when he was walking out with a piece of paper, everyone was so happy for him, for all of us. And the secretaries out there who he had gotten to know over 2 years asked him, give the paper to us, this certificate. And they held it up to their picture, their altar of Krishna, and just offered it to God there. And it was just, everything about it was sweet. It was Kriya, this pure selfless action, this whole process of serving and giving. And this is the way to freedom. It's not working out karma, it's not doing great things. It's this complete selflessness of spirit. Now, in the Kriya Yoga book, which I think many of you have, that I wrote and was released in the last month, a month or two ago, I tell a story about this attitude of complete selfless giving. And it's a particular telling of the story of Karna, one of the characters in the Mahabharata, who's a tragic character, but the telling of this story, which I was told came from the original scriptures, it portrays him in a very different light. And in the final battle between his brother, really in the end, Arjuna, and Karna, Krishna finally tells Arjuna, Arjuna has riddled Karna with arrows. He's full of arrows, and Krishna finally tells Arjuna, he said, you can't kill him because he has too much spiritual karma, and you cannot be defeated until that spiritual merit, which was good karma, was all used up. And so Krishna, to help his disciple Arjuna, disguised himself as a wandering sadhu, and on the battlefield approached Karna, seeking alms from him. And he knows that Karna has nothing to give to him. He has no alms or anything, and that he's also generous to a fault. And so Krishna asks him, since Karna can't give him anything, he asks Karna for all of his spiritual good karma and merit that he has ever earned. Imagine if someone came up to us and asked us for all of our spiritual good karma. And I think Karna probably understood that it was the Lord himself, but even if the Lord himself asked us that, I don't know how many of us would just freely give it. And so Karna replies by telling him, I give you all of the spiritual merit I've ever gained in the past, all that I am currently earning, and all that I will ever gain in the future. And I give that all to you. And that's, talk about complete selfless giving. I mean, that's just to an amazing degree. And Krishna wants even more. This is the funny thing. Knowing that Karna doesn't have the water that you traditionally bless alms giving with, Krishna still insists that Karna follow that act of giving of water. And Karna has no water even, so he removes one of the arrows and the blood comes out, and that's what he offers. That's what he blesses, this offering that he has given to Krishna. And then he faints at that point, and he closes his eyes, and suddenly he feels drops of refreshing water on himself as he's sitting there. And opening his eyes, he sees the Lord himself in his full splendor, and he realizes that he is being blessed by God, and it's Krishna's tears of compassion that are what he was feeling as this gentle rain. And this is the part of the story that is even more amazing and I think helpful to all of us, because Krishna tells Karna that his generosity, his selflessness is pleasing, and he grants him any wish, any boon that he would like, he will give him. And think about it, and I'll read it how I write it in the book. What would you ask for if God offered to grant you any wish? Think about it for a moment. And then I write in the book, Karna's request is equally surprising and liberating. He asks only that in future lives, he again be selflessly willing to give to anyone whatever that one asks. Krishna replies, your sins are insignificant when compared to the merit accrued by your charity and magnanimity. Your present suffering is due to those sins, but fear not, Karna. By your final act of surrendering even your merit to me, I myself shall take on the burden of your sins and will relieve you from your physical pain. And Krishna then tells Karna that he will never again have to reincarnate. He's become a Jivan Mukta, not because he worked out his karma and did the right thing. He was on the side of the bad guys in that whole story and had bad karma. But he never had to reincarnate again because he had developed that complete, pure selflessness of giving. And so we don't need to reach perfection of karma, of ourselves, to find God. We just need to learn devotional self-giving and self-offering in everything that we do, which really is yoga in a way. And it is especially Kriya Yoga, not the technique of Kriya only, but learning that everything is a pure action given to God when every action is done selflessly, without thought of ourself, without thought of our little self or what's in it for me. So let's learn more and more to live like that, to live like as if we were Jivan Mukta, to learn to live with that selfless giving in everything that we do. And you know, if we do that to the extent that we do, then God, the Lord himself, will come and bless us with that freedom and liberation, just as he did with Karna, who had a lot of faults and flaws in him and had made a lot of mistakes. So let's live like that and we can be free. Om, peace, amen.